Hey everyone, I'm Gracie. Welcome to the Grace of a Military Child podcast. The world should know how unique military children are. We may look like normal children on the outside, but we go through some pretty extraordinary circumstances that shape us to the leaders we are today. Keep listening to hear the incredible journey this week's guest has been on. Well, hi Leah, welcome to the podcast. How are you?
I'm doing well. How are you?
I'm doing good. Well, thank you so much for being on. I'm super excited to have you.
I know. I'm really excited to be talking today about my experiences as a military brat.
Yeah, so tell me a little bit about your dad who was in the military and what kind of just an overall experience was that like?
So my dad has been in my entire life. He's retiring next year, so I'll be out of the house by then. I'll be 22. So my whole childhood was, around the Army. He started off enlisted and then became an officer later on. My whole life he's been an officer. I've moved 10 different times, and I've lived on base, like on the military bases for most of my life. Until I was about 15, we were pretty much always on base, which I honestly really liked growing up on the military base. It was really safe, and all my friends were there, and everyone was in the same boat. And I think it's very different from moving on in the civilian side, just because not all the kids really understand what you're going through. Like, I always thought it was normal to move around every few years until I was a little bit older, and I realized, it's not normal. But I did like moving. Of course, it's hard, and there are some moves I really didn't want to do, but in the end, I think it helped strengthen me, and I loved all the friends that I would make in the new places, too.
Yeah, where all did you move to? Where all did you live?
So I was born in Georgia at Fort Gordon, but I was a baby, so I don't remember that, and then we moved to Michigan, Lansing, because my dad went to school there, so he was a student. And then West Point, where my brother was born. And then Fort Lewis in Washington. Leavenworth, Kansas. Michigan again, he was up at another college up in Kalamazoo. And then San Antonio, Texas. Montgomery, Alabama. And then Northern Virginia, D.C. area, and now we're in South Carolina.
Wow.
So, yeah, it's a lot.
All in 15 years.
I know. I always forget some,
Yeah.
That's all of them.
Yeah. Do you have a place that, I don't know, you feel more is home or a favorite place that you've been to?
I really liked San Antonio a lot. That was probably one of my favorite places that I've lived. But when people ask me where I'm from, I usually say Northern Virginia because that's where I went to high school and that's where I was last. So I usually just say that. I feel like I had a lot of formative years there too. But I think if I had to move back to any of those places, it would probably be San Antonio.
San Antonio is the best.
It is. And I liked Washington too, Seattle, out there. But I was so young, I didn't really remember it as much. But I went back this summer for an internship, and I loved it. So I would move back there. I never really lived in my opinion, never really lived in a bad place. I did like them all.
Yeah.
But
there's something good about everywhere you live, even if you get stuck in the middle of nowhere. You just have to be able to search for, those little things that make an area special.
Exactly, I agree. Even Kansas, I'm what? Everyone's you lived in Kansas? I'm yeah, it was actually so fun though. I loved it there. So
yeah, and once you get used to an area, it takes a long time for some people to get used to an area, but once you get used to it, it's okay, this is actually not that bad.
Exactly, and honestly, if it is bad, you're probably gonna move in a year or two. So.
You're not wrong. Yeah. Because you lived in 10 different places and it's you don't have much time in each place. You're in and out more or less.
Exactly. Like the longest I've ever lived in a place was 3 years, except South Carolina right now because I'm in college here. I'm at like the 3.5 mark. But I'm
Yeah.
like, that's the longest I've ever lived anywhere. It's kind of crazy.
Are you getting like antsy to move again?
Honestly, yeah, I've kind of been that way. I noticed when I lived in Virginia for high school, we were there for 3 years. I did my freshman year in Alabama, so the other years were in Virginia. And I remember near the end of like senior year, I was kind of like ready to move. Like I loved high school. I loved my friends. I didn't want to move, but I was like ready. Like I was like, all right, I've had enough of this area now. Like I want to move on. And now I'm like, I love college. Like it's the best, but I'm kind of like also ready to like move to a new area and everything. I'm like, I've done everything I can here. Now it's time to go somewhere new.
Exactly. You have to move on. And, the military life is not stability. It does not teach you stability. It teaches you to go
No,
with the flow. So you have to be able to like pick up and move on in whatever situation that, is thrown at you.
exactly. But yeah, I'm excited for what the next chapter holds. But I'm going to obviously enjoy my last few months in South Carolina.
Yeah. What kind of things has the military life taught you?
Definitely resilience. I think military children are all very resilient because they're able to, pick up everything and start over every few years. So, and they make the most of it. So, definitely, I think I'm pretty resilient from that and like adaptable too, which is like a big strength, especially just like as a nurse too. We get floated to different floors in clinical, and I'm able to like adapt well. And even transitioning into college, I know like some of my friends had like a harder time at first, like making friends and just transitioning. And I think my experience would have been different if I wasn't a military brat. Like I feel like moving around helped me transition to college. Like I was like, it's just another move. Like it didn't seem like a big deal to me as much as like some other people did. Because a lot of people you think like spent their whole life in one place. So transitioning to college is like their one big move. But for me and like other military brats, it's just kind of like another move you do.
Yeah. The only thing different about it is like you're by yourself now.
Yeah. And thankfully I'm like the oldest and I've always been more kind of independent. That's just how I am. So that wasn't too bad. I was kind of ready to move out, honestly. But now like that I'm actually entering the adult world, I don't want to do it. Like I like to rely on my parents for a little bit, but now I'm going to be a real adult. So it's kind of scary.
Yeah, you're not going to have them in like, the same state as you to be able to just...
Yeah, it's kind of crazy. Because my college right now is pretty close to my parents. So I don't really go home that often, but I still like can see them when I want. Like I know they're there. So it's going to be just very different, especially since, I'm joining the military too. So I could go somewhere super far and like,
yeah,
they'll still be here. I don't know. It's just weird. A lot of changes coming.
I know. And you never know. I mean, especially again with the military life, like, I mean, you already know it. You don't know what to expect half the time.
No, I have no idea where I'm going to go, but we'll see.
What made you want to join the military?
So it was always kind of like my dad always talked about doing ROTC, but he never like forced it on me, but it was always kind of in my mind, like, oh, that's an option. And so when I was applying to colleges, I decided to apply for like some scholarships, and I was like, I'll apply for ROTC and I'll see. So I ended up getting a 3-year scholarship, so they paid for 3 years of my tuition. And I mean, that alone is hard to turn down just because school is really expensive. But
right.
My dad was like, you don't have to take it, but try it out. So I went freshman year, and I really liked it a lot freshman year. I met like most of my friends. I'm also in a sorority, so I had my sorority friends, but I met a lot of good friends in ROTC. Like I would hang out with them a lot, and we all lived like near each other in the dorms. So we would always hang out and always do things together. And I loved like the community we had because when I complain, I mean, I do complain about it sometimes because it is hard. But when I talk about it with my roommates or sorority friends, like, they don't get it to the full extent as, like, the other ROTC kids. So, like, it's like they understand kind of, like, what you're going through and, like, the stuff that we have to do that might be different from the normal college student. So I liked having that kind of community. And I just kept doing it because I liked it. At this point, I'm kind of over it just because it's been, 4 years, and I'm like, all right. And like, all the people who run it are military too, so they move in and out. So like a lot of my like mentors who I had at the beginning are like gone now, and I like the guys who work there now too. But I'm just kind of like, I need change, but I still like it. I like I said, I met my boyfriend in ROTC. I have like good friends in ROTC, and especially the nurses who are also in ROTC, they like get it because we all have like weird schedules with clinical and hard subjects to study and ROTC on top of that. So it's nice to have that group too.
Yeah, and it's just another community that you have. Like you have your friends in classes and whatever else too, but it's another group that gets it more than anyone else will.
Exactly. And I do kind of like the discipline it puts on me. And just like the standards that it sets. Like I like to try and hold myself up to those standards. I don't see myself as of right now staying in the military super long, but my dad also said that, and he's been in like for 20 plus years, so we'll see. I never know. Maybe I'll go in and love it. Like this summer, I did an internship with ROTC. I had like a nursing internship up at Madigan Army Medical Center, which is one of the hospitals up in Fort Lewis, Seattle area. And I loved it. Like it was the best experience. It was better than any clinical I've had at school. Not that my clinicals are bad, but this was like I had a 1-to-1 ratio with my preceptor, where at school it's like 6-to-1. So the attention isn't always on you. And it was nice to like, I definitely learned like the most skills ever. And I was in the ICU, which I really liked doing critical care. So it was like the best experience. So who knows? Maybe I'll go in the Army and like love that and want to do that forever. But we'll see. I'm keeping an open mind.
Yeah. Is there a place that you want to like go back to that you lived at before?
So for medical, we all go to San Antonio actually for the first like few months for training. So I know for sure I'll be going back there for about 3 months. And I'm really excited. I'll be going like late summer, early fall, most likely. So I'm excited to go back to San Antonio. And that's also an option on my duty stations. So it's ranked pretty high on mine. It's in my top 5. And then also just working this summer over at Madigan in Washington, I really liked that area and I loved it a lot. So I put that up pretty high. But the thing I'm a little worried about is the weather. Because when I used to live there, I was younger. I was like 2nd grade, 1st grade. So I don't remember a lot of details, but when I was there this summer, obviously like the weather is beautiful, but it is in Washington on the Pacific coast. So I know it gets really cold and I know it rains a lot other times of the year. So I don't know. I know summer is nice though. So at least I have that if I get there.
At least, one season of the year is nice. 1 out of 4.
Exactly. Yeah, I'm like, I love it. It's so beautiful. But now I have the weather on my phone. I check it every now and then. I'm like, oh gosh, it is not like it was this summer. But I still think it'll be like it's going to be a very pretty place no matter what. And I do love the hospital there too. So if I do get there, I would not be upset. It's ranked very high in my list.
Yeah, that's awesome. Those are like, fun places, and having been places and then, be able to go back to places is always fun, and remembering memories. And
I know, it's so weird. I haven't been back to Texas like since 2014, I think.
Oh my gosh. Yeah, we went back March of 2020. And
oh, really?
I took my senior pictures there. And so, driving around the base, going past the hospital and driving by our old house, and the schools were obviously closed due to the extended summer break or spring break of COVID. So we couldn't go visit teachers or anything, but we did pictures in front of the schools too. And so just driving past and being at the school was so weird, going back and, remembering everything. It's
such a weird feeling. It's like all this nostalgia hitting you at once.
I know. And, it's also weird because, the military life, going back to Texas, we knew you guys there. I had tons of friends there and nobody was there still.
Really?
Nobody really is there. So it's not out of the military friends, there's no one really to visit back there because everyone has moved. And so, while we had some friends that stayed in Texas and we can visit them, it's weird at the same time.
Because it's definitely not the same. It's a whole bunch of different people. Yeah, that is weird.
Yeah, because we used to, Girl Scouts, that was one thing. We'd all meet on base and everything. And, everyone's all around the country now, more or less.
Yeah. It's so weird to think about because in your mind, you're kind of like, oh, I moved, but you don't really think about everybody else picking up and leaving.
Exactly. Yeah. When I moved from Ohio to Texas, everyone is still in Ohio. Everyone is still there. My dad was reserved, so he didn't, move around a lot. And everybody we knew didn't move around either. So
there was a culture shock.
Yeah. And going back to Ohio is one thing. Everyone's still there. And then going back to Texas, nobody's still there.
It's crazy. It is. It's so weird. But it also, when you think about it, it's good networking.
Yeah.
You're like, oh, I have a friend in this random state, So it's nice to have that.
Yeah. We have friends all over literally the world. We can go anywhere and we know people.
Yeah. It's kind of cool.
It is really cool.
Yeah. I always think about that. I'm like, whenever I'm in a new place, I'm like, do I know anyone who lives here that I can meet up for lunch or something?
Yeah.
Just such a small world.
And it's you have a personal tour guide then too, which is really cool.
Exactly. They can tell you what to do, where to go and everything.
Exactly. When we were in Texas, we haven't gotten to do it yet, but we met a friend, and I was so young that I really don't remember, but we met a friend who lives in Germany now.
Oh,
and, has lived in Germany. She's German, so she went back to Germany. And so she lives in Germany now. And so it's okay, one day when we go to visit Germany, we can go visit and, see old friends. And, it's just my parents ended up going to Scotland in 2015 to do I don't know what you call it. It's not really a race, but they call it the Scottish Yomp. And there's a bronze, silver, and gold level of it. And the gold, I believe, is 56 miles through the Scottish Highlands.
Oh my gosh.
So it's a hike, more or less. And so the bronze is 20 something. And then I think the silver is 36. So it's pretty intense. And so my parents went and did it with some military friends from the States, and they met people in Scotland. And so when we went to Scotland, we went and we were able to visit these friends that they made in Scotland, and they were able to show us around. And, we didn't have to rely on an Uber or a taxi or anything like that, because they could drive us around, and, we could hang out with them too.
Right. It is. It's such good networking, especially when they go to cool places like that. That you want to visit.
Exactly. And, they know all the hidden details of the places where, going over there, it's okay, well, you can go see the castle. You can go, see this. But they're oh, no, you don't want to see that. You want to see that. And, you have to go to this place. One of our favorite parts, besides going and seeing all the Harry Potter stuff that we did,
so cool.
which was so cool. It was amazing. But like going to their version of Walmart was literally the best.
Really?
They literally have Asda instead of Walmart, and it literally has like the same like Walmart star logo and everything. It's just so much cleaner and nicer than Walmart.
I also heard like McDonald's in foreign countries are so different.
Oh yeah.
Really?
We went, so my parents went before we all went as family, and so they went over there and they ate at McDonald's, and on the kids menu they had fish sticks.
Oh my gosh, really?
And so when we went over there, it was on Kaylee's like bucket list to go and eat the fish sticks at McDonald's.
That's so funny.
And like how you have to pay for each barbecue sauce packet?
Mm-hmm.
They have it in the big pumps, like the ketchup
really?
pumps. Mm-hmm.
Yeah, I heard they're like nicer outside of the US. Yeah.
Yeah. They have like, I like McDonald's every once in a while. Mm-hmm. I was one of the ones who, when they came out with the 50th anniversary, like Happy Meal toys for Disney,
right?
I ate there like twice a week, probably more, to try and get all of these toys. And so, since then, I've kind of been over McDonald's, but I will still eat there every once in a while. I'm not against it or anything. But going overseas to another McDonald's in another country is so different. Mm-hmm. It's like so much healthier. Yeah, I would prefer to eat there over anything.
It's so crazy.
Yeah. And you don't think of that stuff, like, unless you're an avid traveler, like going to a different country every week or something, like you don't think about that stuff because you're just so accustomed to what's here.
Yeah. Like, I've only ever lived in the U.S. and like I've never really been out of the country. So when I do, like, I'm not going to know anything. But it's nice because I also know people in Germany and like Europe. So I'm definitely going to have to like text them for advice. It's like, I'm going to be so lost.
And it's so weird over there. Like, over here, you really don't take public transportation. You don't take the buses out anywhere, like the city buses. Mm-hmm. Well, in Scotland, everyone takes the buses everywhere. Right. Nobody
drives. It's like
drives.
A big Europe thing. It's like doing public transportation. Yeah, I don't know why America's not really on that yet. There's no really reason not to be.
Yeah, I always like, see it and I'm like, it looks shady. Like, it doesn't look safe. And then over there, it's like just normal that everyone, takes the public transportation. Right. And we've got like, DC area, the metro, subways are in almost every big city and stuff. But that's really it when it comes to our public transportation. Everyone drives themselves or, does whatever. Yeah. And wait, where are you living right now, did you say? In Cape Coral, Florida. I thought you were in Florida. So that's Southwest really cool. Florida. That's really good. We're about like 2 hours away from Tampa, 3 from Orlando, and 2 from Fort Lauderdale, like 2.5, 3 hours from Miami, depending on where in Miami you want to go. Okay, yeah. I thought you were in Florida. That's really cool. Do you like it there? Yeah. I do. It took me forever to get used to it. Really? Is it different from Texas? It's so different. Like, because I only lived in Ohio and Texas. Right. So it was like, it took me a while to transition from Ohio to Texas, and then it took me a while to transition like Texas to here, like 3 years. Mm-hmm. And so I like literally hated it here for so long. I was like, I'm going back to Texas. My parents almost sent me on a flight back to Texas by myself because I was like so done with it here. And so, but once I got used to it, I really loved it, and I'm still here. My college is only about 45 minutes away. So I still live at home as of right now. Oh, that's I'm nice, considering moving out, but moving closer to campus, because, 45 minutes is still a tough drive every once in a while.
That's like my college in my like family's house.
Yeah, so it's not like so far, but it's far as to, I'll be up there 4 days a week, three or four. I'm still waiting on like
that's a lot
my
of gas
schedule.
Money.
Exactly, and gas is expensive right now, and it's going down hopefully, but gas is expensive, and it takes a lot of time out of your day just driving back and forth. So I've loved it so far though. Just
Good.
being
Be
close
resilient.
to home. Exactly. Yeah. And resilience and discipline, because when I come home, after driving, almost 2 hours, and then, having class or whatever, I come home and I'm like, I don't want to do any work. I'm done. I'm done for the day. And then you have to do the work because it's due like that night or the next day or something. And yeah, you really have to be disciplined some days.
Oh, yeah.
Yeah. So, like, what kind of, I guess, traits do you think that other military kids have, or like yourself, that, civilians don't have, that they haven't experienced yet?
I'd say flexibility is a big one, and I'm sure, civilians have this as well, but I don't really know if it's like to the extent as a lot of military kids do, because even like mom and dad leaving, mom or dad going overseas, like they don't know what that's like. You have to change your whole routine, like especially when you're like a child and there's one parent in the household, like they have to do rides for everybody, and like just affects the whole household. It's not just like someone's gone, like it affects every individual in that household. And then also just with moving, again, like you have to be flexible, and like things might change. Like when I moved after my freshman year of high school, and that was like, it was just hard because some of my transcripts didn't transfer, and so I had to like retake classes, or like some of my classes that I took freshman year didn't count. It was just such a pain to like deal with, but I mean, it all worked out. I graduated on time and everything. It was just like, could have been easier. It could have been like better if they accepted them, or if like my old school was like in line with my new school. But you just have to be flexible, and honestly too, like being optimistic and like looking at the bright side. Like I remember moving and I'd be like really sad, and then I would like tell myself, I'm like, well, this happened last time, but then in like 2 months or like whatever, once school starts in your new place, like you're gonna have all these new friends. And like that happened like every time, like it is sad leaving all your old friends, but then once I feel like you start school and get settled, you have to kind of put yourself out there. I think that's a big thing that not everybody really knows. And every kid is different. Like my siblings and I are all different, but I always would put myself out there a lot. And that's how you like kind of have to like start forming friendships, even if you end up like not being friends with those people. Because sometimes at the beginning you're friends with people you might not like stay friends with, and meet other people through them. But I think just putting yourself out there and being confident in yourself is like a big key to like moving and like approaching new situations.
Yeah, because if you're not, confident in who you are, then it's like you can't really meet friends, because you're at that point where you're kind of going to be more concerned about yourself than, meeting other people.
And as you get older too, I notice like not in elementary school, people are all going to come up to the new kid and talk to them. But I feel like as you get older, like they don't really care, they're not all going to be like, oh my gosh, a new kid. They're going to be like, oh yeah, we got a new kid, whatever. Like they're not going to be like bending over backwards to try and make friends with you. At least in my experience, that's what I've noticed. But so you really have to like put in the effort too. Like my dad would always tell me, like, to have a friend, you've got to be a friend, which like
right,
definitely true.
Did you ever move somewhere where you had like, I forget what they called them in Texas, or, everywhere calls them differently, but kind of like a student to help guide you around the first day?
Yeah, I think in Texas, honestly, I think I had one in middle school, so 7th grade when I moved to Texas. And maybe when I was younger, but not in high school or anything, because I went to more civilian schools in high school. So they don't really, and that's another thing is like going to the military, like base schools or like schools where there's a lot of military kids versus civilians. It's like a total different transition. Like moving to Alabama for me, I went to like a private school because there's no high school on post, and it was probably the most difficult transition just because they didn't get it completely, and they'd been together since preschool, and I'm like an outsider. And there's 2 other new kids, but one of them had like grown up in the area and knew them all, and then one was from like Florida, so we were like stuck together a lot. But it was a total different transition. Like they don't really have those like programs where someone's like your wingman kind of and helps you out.
Yeah.
And yeah, so that was probably my hardest transition just because they don't get it, and it wasn't super easy to like make friends with a group of people who, you know, have been friends for like 10 plus years, like their whole lives. So I think I personally liked going to the military schools a lot because everyone was in the same boat. There are constantly kids going in and out, and it was such an easy transition for me, at least, to like go in there because there'd be like 10 other new kids in my like class, you know.
Yeah, every year, you know, you have this like turnover rate that, you know, people come in, people come out, and, you know, it's just military kids are more accustomed to be able to make those friendships, to be welcoming and, you know, have that like wingman person to help guide you around, where as civilian schools, it's like, oh, you're new? Like, what is it like to be new? Like,
yeah,
you know, we're not used to a new kid.
Exactly.
Yeah.
And even just with like deployments too, like I'm so glad that I went to a military school during the time my dad was away because, like I said, everyone knows, everyone gets it. We had like a program at my in Kansas when I was there. That's when my dad was deployed, and it was like 5th grade maybe, and we had like a little club, like hearts apart, like, you know, your hearts are apart from each other,
right?
And we would meet every now and then and like talk, and they'd have fun activities, and like the school counselors would like encourage you to come in if your parents were deployed. Like I would talk to mine about it, and it's just like I know if I went to a civilian school, it would just be like different, you know, like no one would really acknowledge it probably. So it was nice to have like that built-in support system, especially at such a young age where you don't really even know what's going on yourself.
Yeah,
you have your friends.
You just have to kind of adapt with the situation and kind of figure it out. And if you don't have, you know, like those groups to be able to lean on and talk to, like I had a group in Texas that was for like specifically wounded warriors, like children. And so it was definitely, you know, important to have that. Like I was in 6th grade when like 5th, 6th grade when I had that group. So it was very important to have like, you know, people to rely on, people who were going through the same situation I was or a very similar one, and people who actually, like the counselors and stuff who were there, like they wanted to understand and they wanted to help you.
Yeah, exactly. Especially being a kid. Like, you know, that's a big change for your life. Like, normal kids don't go through that. They don't know how to cope. So having that is like so nice, and I think like beneficial too.
Yeah, and like, you know, talking to the lady who led it, like now she's like, I had so many different groups, like for kids who are deployed, for kids like who were just struggling in general, for new kids, for you know, transitioning and things like that. So it's like, this is really important to have. And, you know, even for these DoD schools, or the schools that are off post, like it's so important to have, like, because there is typically a large portion of military kids right outside of post for this families who choose to put their kids in a public school rather than an on-post school. And so they just don't have that. And so a lot of kids who are civilian are unaware of, why kids are moving in and out and things like that, especially at a young age.
Yeah. Yeah, it's definitely like nice just having that. And I'm very thankful that I spent most of like my elementary and middle school years in that environment too. High school was a little different, but I ended up really liking it in Virginia. I thought I had a great high school experience. And also that's like Northern Virginia, DC area. So many military people are there. So there's still a ton of, like, I wasn't the only one. So it was like a public school, but then there's a lot of like military or like parents who work for the government and had to move. So that was nice. But I like that environment as opposed to just going into a random new school and being the only new kid. I'm not a fan of that.
I don't think anyone's a fan of that.
No, it's the worst transition. It's definitely just harder.
Yeah.
But I ended up having a good year in Alabama.
Yeah, I will say, like, when I was in Ohio and went to like a public school and I moved, nobody really understood that I was like moving. They're all like, oh, when are you going to be back? I'm like, I'm not coming back.
Like, bye.
This is it. Like, and I was in 4th grade, so, cell phones weren't really a thing, and texting and things like that was not around. But, looking back, it's like, well, they didn't really understand the military life and what comes with it.
That's another thing is like staying in touch. Like you said, when you're younger, you don't have like a cell phone. Sometimes I wish like I stayed in touch with kids who I was like friends with when I was younger. But it is nice now with social media. It's definitely made such a big difference. Like I'm still, following people who I haven't seen in years. So
yeah,
it's nice to have like the social media and everything. And I remember being a kid and like writing letters to my friends and stuff. And like a lot of my friends from like Kansas, 3rd, 4th, and 5th grade, I'm still good friends with. Like my best friend, I met her in 4th grade, and we still see each other every now and then. Like her sisters just visited me at school. So it's nice to have that like relationship still.
Yeah. And, a lot of people view like social media and stuff as a bad thing, which it is. Yeah. It can be if you don't do it right, then it really can be. But like for the military community, it's so beneficial. Or, I mean, not even just military, but like families who, are constantly moving for whatever reason, it's really beneficial to have that where you can just be like, okay, what's your Instagram or what's your Snapchat or whatever it may be, and, friend someone, and then, you never really lose touch.
And it's always cool to go on like Instagram and see like mutual friends, and it's like, oh my gosh, you know this person, and they're like, oh, I lived with them in like 2nd grade. I'm like, she's my best friend last year or something. I think that's always like super fun, and like it's really funny when that happens. Like my best friend in Virginia, she was my next door neighbor, and one of her best friends had moved to Pennsylvania and had become like friends with one of like a mutual friend that I had. And so she told her, she was like, oh, this girl just moved in, and they realized we were like 2 doors down from each other. It was just so weird. Like we were all friends in like a weird web, but it was really fun because we'd all like visit each other and everything.
Yeah, and the military world is like so small that, everyone just knows each other, and, even if you haven't met them personally yet or whatever, most likely someone knows them, and, those mutual friendships.
Even I went to like camp this summer, like my cadet summer training for ROTC in Fort Knox, and every cadet in the country goes there. So I made a lot of new friends. And like even that, it's just such a small world. Like I had a friend, one of the guys in like California, and we were like pulling security or whatever together and just talking. And he mentioned the name of someone who I knew when I was like in 2nd grade. I'm like, what the heck? Like he's doing ROTC now too, I guess. But I'm like, this is so weird. And like it's also nice to stay in contact with those people from like being in the military, like that standpoint, because I'm sure I'll definitely see some of them again. Especially because a lot of the boys in my platoon are like infantry or armor. So they'll all be going to Fort Benning, Georgia after graduation for a few months. And like my boyfriend just got armor, so he'll be at Fort Benning too. So if I visit, like I'll probably see kids I went to camp with. So it's nice to like have those connections too. So
yeah, and it's really cool to be able to meet different people of different backgrounds. And, you know, I'm sure a lot of them don't have a military background themselves. So it's nice to kind of hear different stories and different experiences.
It is, yeah, because a lot of them don't have a military background. You're totally right. But it's just cool because, like, we are so close. I mean, you're together literally 24/7, like, all the time. So you get so close to them because you're kind of forced to. So it's nice, though, because it was kind of sad when I left. Like, camp isn't, like, super fun, but I was kind of sad, like, graduating. I was like, oh, I'm going to really miss these people. Like, I've been with them nonstop. And a lot of them, like, we didn't even get to really say bye because, like, after our little graduation, they're, like, just forcing us on buses, like, whatever. But I was like, damn, that's kind of sad, just, like, not saying bye to them. But it's so nice to have social media and be able to text them. And, like, we all texted when we got our job choices and everything. So it's nice to have that, like, connection still with them. And I'll always remember them as, like, the people I went to camp with. And my dad even told me, like, he ran into a guy he went to camp with, like, 2 years ago or something. Like, ran into him at some random Army installation, and he saw the name, and he was like, hey, and he was like, oh my gosh, like, they remembered each other.
Yeah.
And even when I was at camp, like, one of the first nights, you know, I'm scared, I did not want to be there, but I'm in the dining facility, and I see this kid who looks really familiar, and he's like, Leah? I'm like, Parker? And it was a kid from Texas. I haven't seen him since 7th grade, and, like, we just saw each other in the, like, DFAC. I'm like, oh my gosh. So it's cool to have that too, like seeing people I already knew. It was pretty cool to see him because we were like good friends in Texas and haven't seen each other in like 10 years.
Yeah, and like even if you don't keep in contact with these people, it's like it could be 10 years and not a second has gone by.
Exactly. It's always nice to have that connection too.
Yeah. You always have someone to like fall back on or, you know, be like, hey, I need something, and, you know, always there for you. Yeah. So the last question I always ask is, what advice would you give to another military child?
Shoot, that's a hard question. I would say, like I said earlier, especially if you're moving, or even if you're not going to, like, if you're just going to college or somewhere new, I think my number one thing is definitely just put yourself out there and be a friend to others. You can't expect someone to just want to be best friends with you because, like, they might not even know you. I think you really have to stay true to yourself, though. Don't change just to be cool, whatever's cool at that school or wherever you are. Be true to yourself and put yourself out there. And, I mean, people will be attracted to you for your heart.
Yeah, that's really important.
Yeah.
Yes. Well, thank you so much for being on and sharing your story.
Of course. Thank you so much for having me. This is a really cool podcast.
Thank you all for listening to this week's episode of Grace of a Military Child podcast. If you enjoyed listening, don't forget to follow, like, share, subscribe, review, and comment. You can also follow us at Grace of a Military Child podcast on Facebook, YouTube, and Instagram for more podcast-related content. If you or someone you know is a military child who would like to be on the podcast, please send us a message to one of our social media platforms, or you can send an email to grace.of.a.military.child@gmail.com. Tune in next Thursday to hear another incredible journey.